Hi there. We are live right now on Facebook on this wonderful Giving Tuesday, and thank you again to all of the donors who have already contributed throughout the course of the day to our cause. You're making a difference right now, and you will be making a difference in the future with all of your contributions. So thank you again. And of course, donations are always accepted at crohnsandcolitis.ca if you want to make a donation at any point through Giving Tuesday or any time. And you may have noticed if you've been on our social media accounts today or on our website today, we had a very touching and very moving story that was posted on our website as well as across our social media channels about a young man named Cam Lister who unfortunately died as a result of ulcerative colitis. And that was written by his mother, Shirley, who's with us tonight. And we are so grateful to have Shirley not only here tonight, but again, for the strength that you've shown in sharing Cam's story and doing all that you have to raise awareness about the severity and the seriousness of both Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So, Shirley, thank you so much for sharing Cam's story and again for being with us here tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's a very important story for people to find out. It's not common. It's a rare occurrence, but it can happen.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing that we want to get across today is that while we always think about Crohn's and colitis as lifelong diseases, that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to be life-threatening diseases at the same time. So, just a little bit more about Shirley, who is joining us today. Shirley was born and raised in Central Alberta, and has been married to her husband Bob for 27 years. She has two sons, Greg and Cam, and has been employed as an educational assistant for over 20 years and has served at the same school for 10 years, and being creative, gardening, traveling, family history, reading all a few of her interests. And of course, she has a keen interest in Cam and all that he did and the wonderful person that he is. So we're here tonight just to talk a little bit more about Cam, about his time with ulcerative colitis and the impact that his death has had on the family. Again, as a way to raise proper awareness about what the diseases can do and keep everyone in mind, whether you're living with the disease or care about someone who has the disease, it's always important to take things seriously. So I'll turn most of this over to you, Shirley, and if you can just start by telling us a little bit more about Cam.
Cam was an old soul. I'd like to call him. He was wise beyond his years. He was a person that could talk to anyone, and he was comfortable doing that. Very few people his age can talk to 80-year-olds or talk to little kids. He had no problem talking to anyone. He's very intelligent, but most of the time he had this outside the box thinking, and he confused me a lot. Him and I, we bantered back and forth. He was very intelligent, like I say, and he was smarter than I was. I hate to admit it, but it's true. He was a team player. He loved being on sport teams, and I think joining the reserves was just being on another team. He absolutely loved that life. He was an avid reader. His favorites were serial books. He liked to have more than just one. He liked to have 9 or 10 in the series. Same with TV shows, House and CSI and all those kinds of things. And he loved music, and I have so much of his music, his playlists, and you can't say that he was a person that loved just one kind of music. He's got the 70s in his soul. He loved the Southern rock, but then he also had Eminem. 3 Days of Grace, loved 3 Days Grace. And so he was just all over the place. Whatever he liked, he just listened to. He didn't worry about what was in fashion or what was hot at the time. He was very thrifty, cheap, actually. He would go and buy the cheap $4 jeans at Frenchie's in Nova Scotia rather than designer. He didn't care if they had a label on them. He just didn't want to spend a lot of money. And he liked to harass people that preferred going to Smitty's for breakfast over Humpty's, a local one. It's at least $5 cheaper. And he says you get the same thing, but it wasn't. But he wanted to spend less. And speaking of food, he absolutely loved food. And I think that was the worst part about UC for him. was that he couldn't eat the food that he liked. He loved spicy food, like sriracha sauce. He put that on everything, you name it. And he said, this disease is not going to stop me from eating my hot sauce. He loved donaires. Being out in Halifax, he would.
Proper East Coaster.
Yes, you betcha. He loved the seafood out there, and then his Polish heritage came through. He absolutely loved the garlic sausage and pierogies.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And from our little conversations in the past, as well as what you've written about him, I know that he was an avid Oilers fan as well, and a hockey player himself, who was a goaltender. So tell us a little bit more about his demeanor when he was in the crease, because he didn't seem to be a very shy person when he had the mask and the pads on.
Oh no, he was a different person once he got the mask on, because he would bark orders. You could hear him yelling in the stands at his team, and he was constantly slapping his stick on the ice for the other team, to distract them or to get the attention of his players. He was what was called a quiet leader by a lot of his coaches. He led by example. He didn't have a C on him, but his teammates followed him.
Very much a leader in the making.
Yes, exactly. And an interesting story about his goaltending is that he was, when you're in the lower levels, everybody takes their turn in net, and everyone else would cry when it came to be their turn. But Cam had way too much pride to cry. He'd cry at home about it, but he wasn't there. So the coach thought that he wanted to do it because Cam wouldn't cry. So that's how he ended up being a goaltender. Kind of did it to himself, but he did end up loving that spot.
Terrific. So, I mean, his strength let him embrace something that a lot of other people shied away from, and I think that that does kind of reflect how he seemed to manage ulcerative colitis once the diagnosis came through. So, tell us a little bit more about just when Cam and you realized that something was wrong with his health, and how he was ultimately diagnosed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I live in central Alberta, and he had gone to college out in Nova Scotia. So we were just in contact, through texting and things. And he wasn't saying anything. This was in 2016, and he finished college at the end of May, and he came home for a visit before he headed off for basic training. And I'm fortunate that my boys will talk to me, and he was telling me that he was noticing he had a lot more diarrhea than normal, and that occasionally he was noticing blood, but he didn't have any pain. He didn't feel bad. He was still eating. He was still doing everything that he needed to do. It wasn't affecting him that way yet. So I would say the beginning to the middle of 2016 is when he really noticed it. And because he was going back straight to basic training, he said that he would go to the doctor when he got back. So 6 weeks later, he ended up going to a doctor because it was getting worse then. He still didn't have any pain, he said, but the diarrhea was getting worse, which was getting to be a problem when he was out training.
Of course.
Yeah, and then he was noticing blood practically every time after that.
And it's funny that you mention all of that, because it's very similar to, I guess, a lot of people who have ulcerative colitis, myself included. When I first started having symptoms, again, it was the diarrhea, it was the blood in the stool, and oddly enough, not a whole lot of physical pain, which you sometimes would have expected with a disease like this. And it shows just the differences between each case of inflammatory bowel disease. Obviously, some people deal with excruciating pain, other people less on the pain side and more on the bathroom habit. And so Cam was clearly seeing, I guess, kind of textbook case of ulcerative colitis, in the sense that the blood in the stool was becoming very evident, right. And he had that urgency to go all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once the diagnosis was actually nailed down, and you both found out that he has ulcerative colitis, what was Cam's initial reaction?
Well, he was just glad that it wasn't cancer, because he'd been Googling symptoms. And that was something that always pops up when you start looking at those kind of symptoms. So he was relieved about that. And none of us had really heard much about colitis. It wasn't something that was in our radar. We didn't hadn't occurred to us that it might be that. So it was kind of a surprise for all of us. And he didn't really know where it was going to go because he was feeling bad off and on. It wasn't that it was a full-time thing yet at that time.
And so Cam was, again, is relieved. There's a name to the disease. You can start to get a better grasp of it. What about you as a mother? How did you deal with the fact that now you have a son? He's living a little bit farther away from home, and now there's this disease on top of everything. So what was it like dealing with that, and how do you keep things together when you want to care for someone, but you may have that distance?
Yeah, that was really hard. And with Cam being such a private person, that got to be hard too. I knew a few people with Crohn's, and so I was relieved it wasn't Crohn's because I know how awful they felt and the things that happened to them. So I was kind of relieved initially when I found out it was just colitis. You seem to think that it's a lesser evil than Crohn's, right? And it wasn't. I don't know. He wasn't feeling bad. His medications were controlling things. He was feeling better from when he first got his diagnosis, and then he got 2 weeks into his meds. He felt better, so he was feeling very positive, and so then I was too. I thought, okay, we've got this under control now.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, again, you touch on another good point about the differences between Crohn's and colitis, and I think sometimes people thinking that colitis being, again, quote unquote, just colitis or just the large bowel being primarily impacted as opposed to the rest of the gastrointestinal tract somehow makes it seem a little bit lesser of a disease, and yet obviously we see incredible amounts of devastation as a result of both diseases. And so, every case of IBD is going to be a little bit different and different levels of severity. And I think that's what we're trying to hammer home throughout this conversation is that no matter what form of IBD you have, no matter how mild it may seem, it's always important to take the disease seriously.
Very serious.
And so tell us a little bit more about his time with the military and why he decided to get into the reserves in the first place.
Well, he had talked about the military. His grandfather served and his grandmother too. So he kind of a military family. But he was a gas jockey, and we live close to the Wainwright base, Army base. And sometimes their convoys roll through town, and it happened that the gas station he works at is on the highway, and a few of the boys came through, and he started talking to them, and they started recruiting, basically. And so he was about 16 then, and it kind of turned his head towards thinking that way. But of course, he wasn't thinking the reserves then. He was thinking, going regular force. And there's none around here. Wainwright's is far away, and then the Edmonton base is quite a ways too. So the reserves weren't something that was very feasible around here. But once he got to Nova Scotia, they're everywhere. There's bases all over because I guess it's just a smaller place, but it's more prevalent out there. Mm-hmm. And so it was there, and he was in college, and he needed a part-time job, and the hours worked out great. He only had to go every Thursday night and one weekend a month, and he thought that would be just perfect. So he signed up, and away he went.
And so that I guess that family history of service also played into the decision to serve as well.
Yeah, I think.
And when Cam eventually released from the reserves and he came back home, tell us what happened from that point on.
Oh, he was only home a week. We got him home, and we realized just how terribly, terribly ill he was, and we just decided that we were taking care of him, and he was going to get better. We all expected Cam to get better from this. Now that he was home and he was going to be taken care of, not that he wasn't taken care of out in Nova Scotia. He had a wonderful landlord that that he room and boarded with that treated him like his own son. He was fantastic with him. But it's always nice to be home. He was glad to be here, and he visited with his grandparents. He visited some of his friends, and he went to a hockey game with his dad. Went back to the arena and watched some hockey, and it was exactly a week from the time we brought him home to the time he died.
And having that happen to you and your family in such a short amount of time, I mean, quick turnaround just from the time of diagnosis to his death, and then just eventually getting back home. And I know that you had mentioned once he was back home, you thought, okay, now we're going to get things under control. So a huge shock, obviously, to you and your family. How did you all process that?
Oh, it was horrendous. I mean, you're never prepared to lose a child. The death of a child is the biggest worry that a parent has, and so when you experience a loss like that, your brain just shuts down. There's no thinking. You're on autopilot for the longest time. And I think that first year our oldest son, he moved back in with us. We all just needed to be together and support each other and to work it out. And he got a lot of anxiety. I was, of course, hyper protective. The poor boy. I was, you get that way when you have that kind of thing in your family. His dad just kept busy working, and he didn't want to sit and think. And yeah, it's hard. It's not something that you think that is going to ever happen to you. Bad things happen to other people, not to you.
And all of that being the case, now you've still tried to turn this tragedy into a bit of a positive note. And what has Cam's death inspired you to do?
Well, I've been doing a whole bunch of things. We've got a scholarship in his name at his school for social studies for people that show leadership and understand the concepts of social, because that was his subject. He really excelled at that. I have a memorial tattoo of his fingerprint and mine, and I read at our school Remembrance Day ceremonies. It's been a catalyst for me to be more involved and to keep his memory going. I think that is such an important thing. And also to educate, because there was no mention of this disease being fatal. We were told 10 years down the road, you can easily develop colon cancer from having this. There's hospitalizations, there's all sorts of things, but there's never any mention of just how bad this disease can get. And so other than we've gone in the gutsy walk to raise money for research, because I feel that is a priority. And I've also started I started this year with the high school students, speaking to them and giving them an understanding of what can happen, because they are in the age group where these diagnoses happen. And it's getting younger and younger, and it's just horrifying. So I tell the high school kids they are now IBD ambassadors. They are to go out, and if they know anyone with that disease, then they have the understanding of what those people go through, and they have compassion for them, because it's a silent disease. You don't go around talking about bowel movements. It's not something that it's not mentioned. And I said, that leaves people alone. And one boy even said, if I had that disease, I wouldn't leave the house. I said, well, that's what happens. And it brought a lot home to them, I think.
Absolutely. And the fact that you were making these people ambassadors as well is just incredibly helpful to the cause as a whole, because it's not just individuals who have the disease; it's the people around them who have
Yeah.
the responsibility as well to tell everybody they can about just what IBD can bring, and the severity of the diseases, and what we can do to make life better in, again, through funding research, through
Hmm.
patient programs to help people who have been affected. And just to highlight a few of the comments, obviously, thank you again for sharing your story, and just some of the comments from people here. Michelle, sending you deepest condolences. May you and your family take comfort in your fondest memories.
Thank you.
Just a sweetheart from Teresa. Laura, sorry for your loss to you and your family. And Haley watching, saying so heart-wrenching. And a very personal comment from Kellyanne. A perforation almost killed me as well. So very sorry. Very tremendous loss. It's amazing to see how many other people have had such a severe reaction as well, like a bowel perforation, and thankfully survived. This one from Pascali. My son and I both have colitis. The minute he starts to flare up, I always worry. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Some people tell me I worry too much, and
No, you can never worry too much.
as a parent, how can you not worry?
No, that's right.
And from Marcy, son also named Cam, diagnosed with Crohn's in June at 16 when his bowel perforated. So, Marcy, I'm glad that your son has survived such a traumatic experience, and thank you everyone for sharing their comments, sharing your stories here with us today. And a little bit more from Shirley, just in terms of after Cam's death, how the military helped in his memorial, and what his old military mates are doing right now.
Oh, they're a special bunch of people. Um, it was just a random comment. I got a hold of a name I recognized from Cam talking, and he was on Facebook, and I just made a random comment after I had told him what had happened to Cam. I wanted him to let everyone know, and I mentioned that Cam had some friends down in Calgary, and I was wondering if he knew who they were, because I kind of wanted a military presence at the service. And that was all it was. I thought maybe these guys from Calgary, it's 3 hours away, maybe they would be able to drive up in their uniforms or something. Well, he went and told some other people, and it just snowballed. They got a GoFundMe account going, and they raised, in 24 hours, they raised enough to get 5 people out. One of the second lieutenant, he paid his own way. And then a pilot from WestJet donated 2 seats. We were able to get 8 of his military buddies out to be his pallbearers. And it was absolutely amazing that to have them here and to meet them, that the faces to the names, because Cam told such funny stories about these people and he enjoyed them so much. So meeting them was just wonderful. They stayed at my sister's house, and she put out a call for bedding and extra food and whatever, and she was absolutely swamped with donations from people. So they were very well fed and taken care of while they were here. I'm still in contact with most of them. Some of them have gone into the regular army themselves. They've kind of scattered around, but yeah, they're Cam's buddies, and they're very special people. They hung his picture in their drill hall, so Cam is still there. Yeah, they're very special. Love them all.
Wonderful to see that kind of reaction from his buddies,
Mm-hmm.
and from the fact that he clearly had a lot of good people around him. I think that's just the kind of
Yes.
magnetism that he had, that he was able to draw all those people to him. And so I just want to get to wrapping things up a little bit for tonight, and just going back to the article that's up on our website right now at crohnsandcolitis.ca. And you did mention towards the end of the article that there's a saying that a man dies twice, once when his heart stops beating, and again when his name is said for the last time. And I hope the name Cam Lyster will continue to resonate, and his legacy will be to educate and warn people of the dangers of Crohn's and colitis. And of course, that's the legacy that we certainly hope for Cam. and our little part, as tiny as it is, that right now, if you go to our website, and forever if you go to our website at crohnsandcolitis.ca and /Cam Lyster, that URL will live on, and that page will live on, and that story will live on, and we hope that a lot more people can learn a lot about IBD as a result of Cam's story. So I can't thank you enough for just the courage that you've shown in coming on and speaking with such poise about your wonderful son, and sharing his story with us and for the world at large, so we can better understand and have more compassion for the people who are dealing with Crohn's and colitis. So Shirley, thank you so much for all that you're doing for our cause, and again, our deepest condolences from everyone at Crohn's and Colitis Canada to you, and of course from a number of people who are watching tonight. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. So Shirley, thank you again once more for all that you're doing. Appreciate the time, and appreciate all that you've done, and appreciate the wonderful person that Cam was and always will be.
Yes, thank you for letting me share his story. I think that there has to be some good come out of this.
Absolutely,
and that's what I'm hoping for.
And I think there has been already, and we'll continue to see more of that. So thank you again, and that'll do it for us tonight on this Giving Tuesday. Again, if you do feel like contributing today or any other day through our website, crohnsandcolitis.ca is the place to do it. And again, we just want to say thank you once more to Shirley and Cam for playing their part in raising awareness and doing what they can to improve the lives of people affected by Crohn's and colitis. So thank you again, and have a good night. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.